Morning, Senator, and welcome to our June 18th forum.
Good morning.
Recently, the Senate passed the fiscal year 2014 budget. Can you speak with us on this?
Yes, on May 23rd, the Massachusetts Senate passed the fiscal year 2014 budget. The Senate budget closes a $1.2 billion budget gap. While investing in some of the most essential elements of government, the fiscal 14 budget utilizes new revenues generated as a result of the Joint Transportation Finance Framework, which was agreed upon by the House and the Senate last month, and continues the Senate's commitment to fiscal responsibility while meeting the needs of the citizens through restoring vital funding to core services and increasing support for economic development and workforce development.
The Senate budget included amendments which continued the Chamber's long history of supporting municipalities and businesses and strengthens the public safety and Commonwealth's educational system, such as
There were unanimously supported changes to strengthen the state's sex offender registry, increased funding for municipal police training programs, changed residency requirements for civil service employees, which I was a co-sponsor of, increased the funding to the state's pilot programs, increased funding for the Shannon grants, which provide support to communities hardest hit by gang crime violence, and by $750,000 to a total of $7 million. It also unanimously increased funding to UGG, which is the Unrestricted General Government Appropriation, funding for municipalities by $21.5 million. It also increased funding for the Home-Based Rental Assistance Program.
the final Senate budget also included many amendments which you co-sponsored, including increasing the funding of regional schools transportation line item, which was passed unanimously by $2 million, funded the Commonwealth Child Care Rate Reserve by $11.5 million, increased the funding for the foster and adopted child tuition and fee waiver, which is needed in order to cover all the spring semester obligations at in-state higher education institutes by $441,000, totaling $3,674,842, and pro-business amendments relative to consumer price scanners and the elimination of the need to collect herd forms.
Two other items that was in the Senate budget that the Senate fully funded was the circuit breaker, which, as Bob, as you know, and the school committee members know, the circuit breaker which funds the special education for our schools, the K through 12 schools, and the Senate fully funded that at the 75% obligation that we have to the communities. We also this year funded a new line item for our regional vocational school transportation. It's the obligation right now. If you have a student that's going to one of the high schools and wants to go to take up an area at a Voc school, a curriculum that, say, the Voc school doesn't have or the school district doesn't have, it's the obligation to have that tuition where he goes, where the student may go, he or she may go, on this school district to cover the costs. Well, what we did in the Senate is we created a line item for the regional vocational transportation of $3 million, which should cover the reimbursement costs for the cities and towns or the school districts to cover the cost of these students. So the budget will now move to the conference committee with the House of Representatives to agree upon the difference in both chambers. The final budget will then go to the governor for his consideration. The new fiscal year begins on July 1st.
Senator, you mentioned as part of the budget, the Senate passed an amendment regarding changes to the state's sex offender registry. Can you talk to us a little about this amendment?
During the second day of deliberations, the Massachusetts Senate, on a unanimously adopted amendment to the fiscal 2014 budget to bring important public safety reforms to the Commonwealth, strengthened the procedures for classifying convicted sex offenders and ensuring that the Sex Offender Registry Board has the information it needs to protect our children in our communities. As a Commonwealth, we have responsibility to protect children and families in our communities. I am proud of the Senate for supporting an amendment that will provide parents, communities, and law enforcement with the proper tools and the information regarding convicted sex offenders to keep our cities and towns safe.
This amendment allows the Sex Offender Registry Board to reclassify a sex offender without a new conviction and authorizes the police and Sex Offender Registry Board to release information on Level 1 sex offenders to the Department of Early Education and Care. In addition, certain law enforcement officials will be allowed to provide information to the Sex Offender Registry Board that is relevant to the assessment of a sex offender's risk to offend or degree of dangerousness.
Level 2 and Level 3 sex offenders will be required to register within 2 days of being released from custody. The law currently requires Level 2 and Level 3 sex offenders to annually register in person, but does not specify when they must first appear after being released.
The amendment also establishes information sharing procedures for the determination of reevaluation of a sex offender's designation within the Sex Offender Registry Board and other state agencies, and establishes a commission to develop risk assessment protocols for sex offenders.
The Senate Ways and Means Fiscal Year 2014 budget recommendations also address the need to reform the state's sex offender registry laws by including measures that the Level 2 sex offender information be made available online and require the Department of Early Education and Care to cross-reference sex offender registry information with the address of a child care program when licensing or approving child care providers.
The budget now moves to a conference committee with the House of Representatives. The final budget will go to Governor Patrick for his consideration, and the new fiscal year begins July 1st. The Senate passed a bill pertaining to limiting legal action that can be taken against off-duty public safety personnel who respond to individuals in need. Are there any details that you may share with us on this?
Yeah, the Senate took a moment to pause from our budget deliberations on Wednesday, May 22nd, to unanimously pass the Good Samaritan Bill to ensure off-duty first responders who provide emergency care are not subject to lawsuits for helping those in need. As the Senate Vice Chair on the Joint Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security, and as a former law enforcement officer, I am proud to support the Good Samaritan Bill. As we witnessed during the recent bombings at the Boston Marathon, public safety personnel quickly and without hesitation sprung into action to help those in danger, whether on duty at the time or not. We must continue to support those who, without hesitation, run toward chaos and confusion to help others by eliminating fear that their bravery could be subject to legal action.
This bill will now go to the House of Representatives for consideration. New technology in public safety is vital to ensuring the safety of our communities. You recently spoke at an event in Boston regarding new technologies and lessons to improve public safety. Can you talk to us a little about this?
Yes, on Thursday, May 9th, I spoke at the annual Smart 911 Summit. Again, as the chair of the Joint Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security, I was honored to welcome the emergency communication leaders from across the country at this annual Smart 911 Summit in Boston. This was a great opportunity for public safety leaders to discuss lessons learned at some of the tragic events that have occurred over the past year.
The Smart 911 Summit, held this year from May 8th to 10th in Boston, brings together emergency communication leaders from across the country to discuss best practices in innovative technologies. This year's summit focused on lessons learned from some of the major events of the past year, including the Sandy Hook Elementary shootings and the Boston Marathon bombings.
Okay, well, I think next we're going to do our first, how many years have we been doing this now? 4 years? This is going to be our first breaking news section. I think as if people are looking at the paper today on June 18th, the headlines are about the Senate coming out with a welfare reform package. The title of the bill is an act to foster economic independence. Everyone, I think over the last several weeks after the Senate did the budget, the auditor came out with a report that identified deceased individuals who were still receiving benefits from the welfare system. The Senate in January had identified this as one of the priorities that we would be addressing this year. So timing kind of worked out, I guess it's a matter of opinion, well for us that the auditor released this report right after the budget, so that some of these issues that we had put on as a top priority for this year came to light right after the budget process. And now we have a comprehensive bill that has been filed that we will be debating on the 20th, June 20th, which is 2 days from now. And this will address several of the amendments that were filed in the Senate budget that weren't successful, but that we were putting off to have part of this larger comprehensive bill. Basically what we're going to, Bob and I are going to go through is the summary of the legislation that we'll be addressing over the next 2 days. Again, the title of the bill is an act to foster economic development. The proposed legislation, I'm going to read the appropriations section, appropriates $2.9 million for the Department of Transitional Assistance, DTA, to hire 50 additional caseworkers, and for DTA to train 66 caseworker specialists who will help teen parents and others in need of specialized services. It appropriates $360,000 for DTA to hire 6 additional inspectors. It appropriates $11.3 million for employment and training services for benefit recipients, including $6 million for employment training services provided by the Commonwealth Corporation through a new retained revenue account, $5 million to DTA to be made available for the Commonwealth Corporation for creation of a full employment program, and $300,000 to evaluate employment and training services. It appropriates $8 million for child care vouchers for benefit recipients in full employment programs. It appropriates $500,000 to allow teens at all stages of pregnancy to be eligible for TAFDC, teen parent shelters, and teen living programs. It earmarks $15 million of the fiscal 13 insurance partnership program appropriation for health insurance subsidies to businesses and recipients participating in the full employment program.
The eligibility and verification rules. It requires self-declarations by applicants or recipients be signed under the penalties and perjury, and prohibits self-declaration from being used as only verification of catalogical and financial eligibility where possible. It requires work participation forms to be verified by a third party under the penalties of perjury to ensure that there is a check on the self-reporting. Increases the current vehicle exemption to 1 vehicle of any value per household. It exempts from assistant units countable income and income earned by a dependent child who is working at a part-time job while attending school full-time. It increases the work-related expense deductions from $90 to $150. It requires DTA to consider the income and assets for applicants who do not provide the required information about citizenship or immigration status, but who are applying for benefits on behalf of their dependent children.
Institutes a 3-month time limit on the validity of placeholder social security numbers, and suspends the benefits of individuals who do not provide a valid social security number within that time limit. This would not apply to recipients who are present in the U.S. under an eligible non-citizen status. Changes the number of days which a temporary absence of a recipient creates a rebuttal presumption that Massachusetts residency has been abandoned from 60 days to 30 days. Changes the requirement that children must attend school in order to be eligible for assistance from age 14 and under to age 16 and under. If a child has more than 8 unexcused absences in a quarter, the family will be put on probationary status. While on probationary status, if the child has 3 more unexcused absences during any month, the family will be no longer eligible for benefits on behalf of that child.
Work exemption changes. Changes pregnancy exemption from work requirement from the last trimester of pregnancy to the 33rd week of pregnancy or later, but permits an exemption for women in their last trimester who provide signed documentation from a healthcare provider. It changes the exemption from the work requirement from age 60 or older to age 66 or older to align with Social Security. It limits work exemptions on the basis of disability to individual meeting Social Security disability standards. It requires individuals claiming a disability to apply for SSI and requires adults caring for disabled dependents to apply for SSI on behalf of that dependent in order to qualify for a work exemption on the basis of disability. It also requires an applicant whose SSI claim was denied to appeal the denial if requested by the department.
Benefit caps and limits on extensions. Reduces the period for an extension of benefits beyond the 24-month period from 6 months to 3 months and limits recipients to receiving only 1 extension of benefits beyond the increased 24-month period. Requires the calculation of the 5-year cap to be based on the family rather than separately for each parent. Requires DTA to develop specific criteria for approving waivers of the family cap for the catch-all of the extraordinary circumstances and limits those waivers to circumstances meeting the DTA criteria. Requires DTA to develop economic independence goals for recipients of cash assistance. Any recipient who reapplies for benefits after their first 24 months of benefits would be required to make a good faith effort to meet their economic independence goals before receiving additional benefits or a benefit extension.
EBT cards. It requires the welfare fraud hotline number and DTA's website to be printed on all newly established EBT cards. It requires photographs on recipients over the age of 18 on all EBT cards and requires the Department of Transportation Assistance to develop regulations to ensure that the household members and authorized users are also able to use the card. The department will have 6 months to implement the program, and all cards will be required to have pictures within 1 year. It creates penalties for store owners who fail to check the photograph or documentation showing that the person is an authorized user. The penalties mirror those for the purchase of prohibited items. First offense, not more than $500. Second offense, between $500 and $2,500. And the third offense is subsequent offense of $2,500 or greater.
One issue that you brought up, the photos placed on these cards, that was one of the issues that there was a lot of controversy in the Senate budget when we voted this issue down based on an amendment. One of the issues that was presented where we have this comprehensive plan coming up, the amendment that came forth during the budget process just required the photo being placed on this. There wasn't an implementation period, and more importantly, there wasn't a line item with the appropriation needed to accomplish this. As part of this package, there's going to be $5 million that's appropriated that's going to be needed to replace approximately over 500,000 cards. So that was one of the issues why several of us voted against the amendment, was because we had the amendment coming forth stating they wanted the photos, but there was no cost factor. So when you're trying to put a plan together, obviously, if you're going to replace all these cars, we all know that there's got to be an expense. In government, we have to be accountable with people's taxpayers' dollars. So that was one of the reasons why that we were deferring that action for this more comprehensive bill. Caseworkers. It requires DTA to ensure that the recipients of cash assistance are able to speak with a caseworker during normal business hours. Requires DTA to have caseworker specialists who are assigned to help recipients in the need of specialized assistance to achieve economic independence, including teen parents and other groups defined by DTA. Provides that specialists would have a minimum caseload of 60, and that each DTA office must have at least one specialist.
Job searches. Requires all applicants for benefits who are not exempt from work requirements to conduct an initial job search prior to receiving cash assistance and provide names of employers contacted to DTA. Applicants must provide this information within 30 days of an application for benefits and sign all job search documentation under the penalties of perjury. It requires that all recipients of benefits who are not exempt from work requirements and who are not matched with a job through the full employment program to submit weekly evidence of job searches to DTA or risk losing their benefits.
And this is one, if people have been listening to the media today and probably the rest of the day till we debate this, to obtain benefits you have to show you've at least been looking for work. It's not going to be come apply for benefits and then claim that you're going to look for benefits, going to look for employment. You've got to show that you've actually been active trying to find a job. And we've actually put other security measures in here. The next is job diversion program. It requires applicants for benefits who DTA identifies as having necessary job skills and experience, who are over age 18, are not participating in education or training, and who are not exempt from work requirements to participate in a job diversion program. Requires DTA to create the job diversion program in consultation with the Commonwealth Corporation with the goal of connecting applicants with jobs before they receive benefits. Directs DTA to include written findings in an applicant's case file for any applicant who meets these criteria but is not diverted to a job.
A full employment program. It requires all applicants for benefits who are not initially diverted to jobs, but who are not exempt from work requirements to participate in a full employment program. It provides that the full employment program will be established by the Commonwealth Corporation in collaboration with DTA to give applicants for benefit full-time employment in lieu of receiving cash assistance. It specifies that such full-time employment must promote self-sufficiency, including the ability to transition off cash assistance. It directs the Commonwealth Corporation to work with the business community to identify jobs and match the skills required for each job with applicants. It provides that if the Commonwealth Corporation determines that an individual needs additional skills to be matched with employment, the individual will receive cash assistance. It directs the Commonwealth Corporation to work with community colleges, vocational schools, one-stop career centers, adult basic education programs, and other workforce training programs to identify and develop, if necessary, programs and resources for applicants who need additional training. It provides the participants in the full employment program would receive a child care voucher during the first year. It provides that businesses participating in the program and participants in the program would also receive health insurance reimbursement through Mass Health Insurance Partnership Program.
In asset development, it requires DTA to create economic independent accounts to allow recipients who elect to participate in the program to save money for first month rent and last month rent, and a security deposit, and to help ease the transition off benefits. It provides that under this program, DTA will require a designated amount of cash assistance to be in escrow for the recipient until the recipient is no longer eligible or in need of benefits. Requires DTA to allow recipients to deposit additional funds. Provides that economic independence accounts will not be a countable asset for determining eligibility. Program integrity. It requires DTA to develop a fraud detection program that will refer all cases of suspected fraud to the Program Integrity Division or the Bureau of Special Investigations. It directs the program to consider multi-even dollar transactions, full withdrawals, usage patterns, and other relevant data. Basically what this goes to, if we remember the auditor's report that came out, it identified individuals who may have had several purchases of $100 at retail outlets. How often do you go grocery shopping where your purchases come out to an even amount? This is geared so that if this happens on multiple occasions, obviously red flags should be going off for the integrity unit to come in to try to look at possible fraud. So that's just one example of what we're trying to look at there.
Housing requirements. It requires dependent children aged 16 and under to attend school in order to be eligible for state or municipality subsidized housing. If a child has more than 8 unexpected absences in a quarter, the family will be put on probationary status, and while on probationary status, if the child has more than 3 unexpected absences during any month, the family will no longer be eligible for housing subsidy. It requires that the Department of Housing and Community Development allow the Worcester Housing Authority to operate its A Better Life program in state-subsidized housing. It expands eligibility for teen living programs and teen parent shelters by allowing teen parents at any stage of pregnancy to be eligible.
Reports and transparency. It requires the Department of Transitional Assistance to make the following additional reports to the legislature. To report biannually on the number of exemptions and extensions granted and the reasons for granting them. Report information regarding how long recipients have been receiving benefits. Report information regarding why recipients are not reaching economic independence. Report quarterly on the number of cases referred to the Program Integrity Unit and the results of their investigations. Report annually on the number of economic independence accounts opened. Report annually on the number of recipients who are eligible for non-citizenship. Requires all training and employment programs contracted with DTA to track client outcomes for at least 1 year after the client finds employment through the program.
Miscellaneous provisions. It requires the EOHHS integrated eligibility system to allow municipal, state agencies and programs to access and share data, including the Department of Housing and Community Development, housing authorities, TAFDC, TANF, and Mass Health. It requires DTA to develop a plan to reduce paperwork and progressively eliminate the need to use hard copies or forms. It requires the DTA to seek federal exemptions and waivers to implement the bill and voids any section of the bill that is inconsistent with federal law or regulations unless GTA requires an exemption or waiver.
Right now, the legislation, the cost estimate is roughly about $25 million. Obviously, we have to estimate because the bill is just, we're going to be going into debate at Thursday. We have until noontime tomorrow to file amendments. I'm already discussing with my office some amendments that I'm looking at filing to try to enhance some of the security measures. So again, by the time this bill gets up for debate, I'm sure there's going to be numerous amendments filed by the other 39 senators. And we can see where it goes from there. But again, this some of the like the work program that was included, that's been included in here, was back in 1995 that program was supposed to be enacted, and I think it was in the late 90s that one of the administrations decided not to pursue it at that time. So this is going back and trying to readdress something that the legislature had passed and was basically disregarded or not followed. So we are going to go back, try to reinstitute it, and again, I think it's really trying to provide assistance to the people who need it, but also not to the second and third generations, trying to give people the skills and the resources so that they get off public assistance, which I think everyone's supportive of.
Just a reminder to everyone, what we've just introduced to you here today is just taking place.
Yes.
Will be in the next few days. It'll be in all the papers.
Yeah.
And the Senate will be taking action on the act to foster economic independence.
Well, another issue right now is some of these reforms were in the House version of the budget that the Senate didn't enact. So that's part of the budget that's being discussed in conference committee right now. The House would like to have some of their reforms adopted. We're trying to confine all the reforms to the welfare system to one comprehensive package to make it, I guess, more in sync with all the changes that we're trying to make. If I can just remind everyone also that June 25th, next Tuesday, is the U.S. special election. I strongly encourage everyone to please get out there and utilize your right to vote. It's an important election, and
there will be a debate tonight. I don't know if it'll be televised in our
I think
area.
Today's the third and final debate, I believe, of that.
Right.
Go Bruins, and if we don't see you before the next show, I wish everyone a happy 4th of July.